All right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Haley. I am the food scientist up in the northwest corner of the state. Today's webinar will be reviewing the revisions to FSIS Directive 6700.1. It will also be recorded and will be made available for program staff to have for future reference. So here is today's agenda. On November 26, 2025, FSIS Directive 6700.1 Revision 2 Retained Water Verification was reissued. It now requires establishments who add an aqueous solution in the raw product process, which could result in products retaining water, are to have process control support by either establishing data support that retained water does not occur or creating a retained water protocol, or RWP, to maintain process control. This applies mainly to establishments that produce raw products with no ingredient statement on the label and use an aqueous solution, so water, antimicrobial sprays, dips, rinses, immersive chilling, etc., within their process as indicated in the directive. Items listed in subpart IV of the directive are subject to the requirements outlined. FSIS started to implement this beginning in December of 2025. This webinar will serve as our outreach to staff and their responsibilities on verifying this process and providing industry outreach on their responsibilities. So we're going to do an overview of the directive. We're going to talk about establishment responsibilities versus inspection responsibilities, and then go over some FAQs. FSIS has published a revised guideline. It's FSIS Guideline 2025 number 1 on the guideline for retained water in January of last year. This guideline clarifies FSIS's expectations for retained water protocols and provides correct formulas for calculating retained water based on weights and on laboratory methods. After reviewing Directive 6700.1, establishments can utilize the guideline to assist them in creating and maintaining their support for their retained water process control. One thing to note is this is applicable at both slaughter and non-slaughter establishments. This documentation must also be made available to inspection staff for review upon request. So, processes that are subject to this directive can be found under section IVA on page 2 of the directive. This includes carcass washing with or without an antimicrobial, spray chilling carcasses, parts, trimmings, byproducts, bones, or other edible parts with or without an antimicrobial, water or ice chilling with or without an antimicrobial, post-chill spraying with or without an antimicrobial, application of any aqueous antimicrobial or processing aid. Products that are also found in our establishments, these can be found in both slaughter and non-slaughter facilities. This is under IVC on page 2 of the directive. This includes raw, single meat and poultry products, kosher products, further processed product when the source material retained water, such as ground product made with source materials that retained water, product with multiple source materials that retained water, giblets, and ritually slaughtered product that bears the mark of inspection. Now, there are some exemptions to the retained water requirements. This can be found under IVB and D on page 2 of the directive. Multi-ingredient products include raw meat or poultry product used as ingredients in those multi-ingredient products, such as raw or cooked sausage, deli meats, etc. Meat or poultry products with added solution, sometimes we refer to these as X% products, are subject to different regulations, so they are not under the retained water procedure. This includes basted, marinated, injected, or tumbled products. Per IVF in the directive, retained water has no effect on subsequently cooked product or its labeling, as retained water only applies to raw products. So inspection responsibilities, all meat safety inspectors, supervisors, food scientists, and regional managers should read the directive to familiarize yourselves with the retained water verification procedures. By March 15th, staff will make their establishments aware of 6700.1 if they are applying this aqueous solution to their process, and then document the discussion in an MOI. We will be providing an MOI template to share with your establishments. Please follow the direction in that document to create and issue the MOI. So, in addition, starting April 1st, when performing a routine general labeling task to verify retained water compliance, IPP are to verify that the establishment does not apply aqueous solutions, or verify that the establishment maintains data on file to support the conclusion that its products do not retain water, or verify that the establishment maintains its written RWP on file. This verification should be accomplished quarterly. Non-compliances should be documented regarding the support or creation of an RWP after this date. Direction on documenting a non-compliance is in subpart VG of this directive. I did create a decision tree of sorts to kind of help staff when performing this task. So when you're doing your general labeling task, at least quarterly, you will start by figuring out if your establishment applies an aqueous solution to its products. If it does not, you will continue by completing a regular general labeling task. If they do, next you will need to determine if they have a retained water protocol on file that meets the requirements. If it does, you will complete your regular general labeling task. Otherwise, if they do not have this on file or it does not meet requirements, you will complete your regular general labeling task, but also document a non-compliance for the retained water protocol. Now, just some FAQs that we anticipate seeing. So what regulation does retained water fall under? That would be 9 CFR 441.10. How does this affect the water in my formulated products? This information is included in IVE on page 3 of the directive, but standards of identity or composition are not affected by retained water. Retained water in the source material is not included in the formulation. So when should I document an NR? Some examples of this would be the establishment adds water but does not have an RWP or support there is no retained water. They're missing information in the RWP. They're not following their RWP. Or the establishment changes its process and fails to evaluate and, if necessary, modify the RWP or collect new data if necessary and revise the label declaration. If you do need to document an NR for RWPs, please follow the direction provided in subpart VG of the directive. Does a pizza plant need an RWP? Most pizza plants are using multi-ingredient products or cooked toppings. Per chapter IVD and F of this directive, 441.10 does not apply to these products. If a pizza plant is using raw toppings, they may need an RWP on file if they apply an aqueous solution, say to a ground beef or something of the sort. So how does this information apply to non-slaughter facilities?
I'm scared.
If a non-slaughter facility has eligible products or processes, They will have to address 4 elements in their RWP. This can be found starting at VE on page 7 of the directive. The directive also lists the 9 elements that slaughter facilities have to address. So, what resources are out there for establishments, and should this be shared during the licensing process? Establishments can refer to FSIS Directive 6700.1, 9 CFR 441.10, and the FSIS guideline for retained water. This should be shared during licensing with slaughter and non-slaughter facilities. What is sufficient support if products or processes do not retain water? The data will contain more than one test or sampled product result to demonstrate process control. It may also include various species, as the process for each species may vary due to hang time in the cooler prior to processing. So just to recap, slaughter and non-slaughter establishments whose process add an aqueous solution are subject to 6700.1 revision 2 and must have support demonstrating whether their process or processes result in water retention by developing and implementing a retained water protocol or maintain written support explaining why an RWP is not required. By March 1st, inspection staff will share the retained water protocol, MOI, with their establishments to make them aware of Directive 6700.1. Starting April 1st, BMPB inspection staff will verify that establishments have taken all necessary steps to ensure their RWPs are adequately addressed, and non-compliances should be documented regarding the support or creation of an RWP after this date. So, are there any questions out there regarding this directive or this PowerPoint? Josh?
Just to clarify, in that one recap slide, it said March 1st. It's actually March 15th. Just make sure that we're all clear on that, and we'll update that as well. Thank you, Haley.
If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we can do our best to answer them now. Oh, Alex, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, so a lot of ground beef products end up having a treatment with an aqueous solution. If a establishment finds they have some retained water, what's the labeling requirements, and like what would be like the lower limit? Is it like 1%, or what if the product like doesn't retain more than, like, let's say, a percent? Is there any limit like that, I guess?
So that is something I'll have to double check. I don't believe there is a limit, but that is something that we can include in our email that goes out. The guideline does discuss the labeling requirements for an establishment, and gives some label examples, but as far as limits, I can double check the guideline to make sure we're giving everybody the correct answer on that one. Are there any other questions at this time about the retained water directive?
Sure. Haley, Emily had posed a question here in the chat.
So I'll start with Emily's question. I'll be honest, this one is probably gonna This one may require more research, but so she asked, is there any concern about the accuracy of the data establishments are collecting when it comes to applying an organic acid spray to their beef before grinding? It's basically impossible to clear the grinder of all product that passes through, so it's likely the data will show that the product is not retaining liquid. As far as the data goes, there are given calculations that the establishment does or should be doing in order to calculate their retained water. As for concern about the accuracy of how they're collecting their data, it is included in these protocols that they should be accounting for their method. So that might cover some of that, but that's one I might need to do more research on. So Ashley asked, what would our expectation for slaughter establishments that may not have a scale to weigh carcasses on the rail? That's another difficult one.
I have that same exact question. I have a plant that doesn't have a scale on their slaughter floor. So now I'm supposed to alter their process of quartering it, go weighing it after it's not washed yet, not sprayed yet, reweighed. Like that's not what their process is. So I'm supposed to ask them to not do their process to validate this. Is that how we will move forward with that?
So, one thing I want to highlight with this is at the end of the day, it is up to the establishment to determine how they are going to meet the requirements of this protocol. If they do not have a scale, things of the sort, it's going to be up to them to determine how they're going to meet these requirements. The guideline does give some different information as to how these things can be met. So our expectation would be that they meet the requirements of the retained water protocol, and if they don't have certain pieces of equipment, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to meet these requirements. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, but are there other questions out there? Oh, wait. Does the scale they use need to be calibrated? I'm not sure if the directive or the guideline is specific on that. That is one I can look into. If there are any questions outside of this meeting, please feel free to reach out to your food scientists, supervisors, etc. And we will do our best to try and answer these questions. So with that, I'm going to stop our recording. And